And good morning, and welcome again to another one of our episodes here at The Way Forward, our podcast who we do with incredible individuals who we are lucky enough to get to come in and talk to us about their life experiences. In a lot of cases, we're talking to former soldiers, retired senior officers who have transitioned into civilian life and who are out here navigating the world that most of our clients live in. And we're going to talk through some of the challenges of that, but also how can someone like Gary Kerr, a colonel, retired, can assist you in that process, being a consultant to help business leaders of all types to understand the value of the things that he's done to ad nauseum in the military that are second nature to him. The one or two pearls of wisdom that he might be able to share with a client in order to help get them to the next level, get them over a hump, get them off a plateau, get them up on the balcony, see the big picture, anticipate, and be able to take care of their people. So, Gary, good morning. It's great to have you. Please tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, good morning. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. So I'm a retired lieutenant colonel. I spent 23 and a half years in the Army as an armored cavalry officer. So never spent a day in a tank unit. I was always in cavalry organizations, which was kind of fun. But I tell people I've been leading people since I was 13 years old. And the reason I say that is because when I was 13, I decided I was going to join the Boy Scouts. And I thought that was, for me, in a developmental standpoint, it was the best thing I could do to learn how to work with others, to support them, and to run missions, because that's kind of what we did at that very young age. And naturally, I gravitated to the military. My dad was in the Army. Went to Ohio State, commissioned out of Ohio State, and spent a lot of time kind of thinking through what I wanted to do in the Army. And the Army sometimes dictates that to you. So it was all right. But went in and decided, I want to go to Ranger School. I want to go to Airborne School. I want to be all those things that people at that time look up to and say, hey, this person is challenging themselves. And so when in the military, you walk into the room and it's just inherent. They look at what you're wearing, where you've been, what you've experienced. And so I was able to go through those difficult training events and learn about myself. So that was kind of the first stage in life, was understanding myself, and then learning about others and how do I integrate others into purpose-driven operations. So spent the 23 years, was privileged enough to lead in combat. Went to Iraq in 2003 as a troop commander in a 3rd Cavalry Regiment. Spent some time in Fallujah initially, and then moved into this place called Haditha. Ran security operations there for several months, and really learned about, what is it that we have to do in that situation. And it really came down to understanding the environment, understanding how to operate within the culture, understanding what people need, and then using my soldiers to support that mission. So it's just an incredible experience, challenging, and just a place where I got to learn. I made some mistakes that I was not proud of at times, but I learned from those mistakes and was able to really accomplish something. I came home and immediately a year later turned around, went back to Iraq as a combat advisor. So we were nine soldiers living with 500 Iraqis patrolling the streets of Fallujah and Baghdad for a year. And I learned about culture, and I learned how to integrate with our Iraqi counterparts and trust them and build trust. And it was hard. It was really hard. We showed up and we were afraid. We were like, we didn't know what to expect. We were 9 guys living with 500 Iraqis, and you didn't know them, and the environment at that time was changing. So had to build trust and had to figure out, how do we train them to get them to a point where they're operating at a high level of operations. And so we had to come up with different techniques to do that. Came home and worked with some National Guard folks for a long time, training them, helping them out, and then worked with a program that we use in the Army to train our our staffs, our divisions, and our corps and our large staffs. So just lots of learning. Ended up going back after the Command General Staff College back to, or went to the 82nd Airborne, deployed immediately to Afghanistan. In fact, my move to Fort Bragg was basically a phone call that said, don't bring anything. You're getting on an airplane as soon as you get here. So immediately showed up to unit and went straight to Afghanistan, where I spent a year on the ground, 13 months on the ground as executive officer. So basically synchronizing a place the size of West Virginia, all the operations with the Italians and with the Afghans and with the 3-letter agencies that were floating around and all the special operations guys, and just trying to make sure that everything was moving in the same direction in that organization and for that province, and that we were able to transition over with authority to the Afghans. And as we withdrew, came home and then immediately went to 1st Infantry Division at Fort Riley, where I had the privilege of working for the division commander as his executive officer. Absolutely loved that. I got insight into what your side of the world looked like at the general officer level, and really learned how to navigate, just an environment at a different level. And then we deployed back to Afghanistan. So, back to back for several years. And in my last deployment to Afghanistan, I was able to shut down operations in Parwan province, transfer those back over to Afghan control, provide security for Bagram Air Base and the perimeter there. And then I worked with the French, I worked with the Malaysians, I worked with the New Zealanders, the Polish forces, and then the South Korean forces as they were withdrawing. The Poles were staying, but and so helped with the logistics to put them together. So building relationships at a multicultural, international level, and then working through that. And then came home and was able to work at an organization in the Army again that trains our large brigade, division, and corps staffs. And I ran a team of consultants there. And those consultants, we would put an exercise on, and they would stand around and take notes and work with the logistics people and work with the human resources people and work with the intelligence people and operations folks. And we would pause this exercise, and we'd bring them in and we'd talk about some of the challenges that they were having in their processes. And so it's just an incredible experience to watch organizations grow and be able to help organizations synchronize their efforts and then do their strategic planning, long-term and short-term planning. So just walk them through. And then finally, my last job in the Army, I actually got to work for a great guy by the name of Chris Hughes at Cadet Command. I ran the ROTC program at University of Missouri. So integrating into a completely different environment for myself, how's a lieutenant colonel with a staff of 4 or 5 folks integrate into a university system. And I dived right in and I said, look, this is no different than operating in Afghanistan or Iraq. Nobody's trying to do bad things to me, but I have to look at the environment and I have to understand, how do we operate in the environment? What are the political systems at that institution? How do they operate? How do they talk to each other? What's the communication style? What's the social entities that I need to be involved in? And I integrated myself into the university and made sure that my cadets were integrated in it. I saw it as a resource to train them to become officers, which was just incredible and really just fun. So I spent 4.5 years there before I retired, and then I went into higher education, working at Park University. It was a great institution that serves military students. About 50% of their students were military, or are military still. And I ran all our military operations, and then integrated in and took over our strategic partnerships, or our corporate partnerships, which we had about 70. And those corporate partnerships was just fostering relationships with our corporate partners to do leadership development, to provide them with a discount so that their individuals could attend college and further their education. And then I took on an additional role of workforce development. So trying to figure out for the community in Kansas City, what are the key things that we needed. And we partnered with some hospitals because they were looking for medical assistants. So this is the people that check you in at the doctor's office. If you haven't noticed, they're short-staffed. So we were able to develop this program that really integrated them into our labs and taught them the skills they needed to just become better. So and now a couple months ago, I decided that I needed to take the leap of faith. The thing that I'm really good at is helping folks build better leaders. So transition our managers into leaders, which I think is a real challenge in the industry. And then giving senior executives some tools and processes, one, to see themselves better, but to streamline what they're doing within their organization. So it's how are they communicating? How can they build trust? And then what are some tools that they can use that make that easier for folks? And my focus is really, I'm focused on people, trust-based, process-driven, and mission-focused or goal-focused.
Okay, well, let's pull that thread a little bit. You talked a lot about what I call cross-cultural competence. And so understanding that one size doesn't fit all, and your morality, your ethics, your values, your education, your world experience never aligns with who you're suddenly stuck with. Okay, so I'm sitting here trying to visualize, and you get the French, the Italians, the Afghans, all mixed together. The Poles, some are leaving, some are staying. Which, if I'm not incorrect, that was a political decision by those countries to poll at a certain time. And next thing you know, you're at University of Missouri and you're talking to academics, and you don't have a PhD, I don't think.
No PhD.
Yeah, no PhD. So you're wholly unqualified to be there. What are some of the tactics and techniques and procedures or techniques that you've used to bridge that divide? What kinds of things are common, no matter what the culture is?
So I think it's just really understanding the environment, understanding what the overarching vision is for the institution or the organization. And if everybody has a holistic understanding of what that vision is, we're all moving in the same direction. And it's funny. So when I worked at One ID, I worked for General Mayville. And he always used to have this saying about this Remington painting that I actually looked up, and I was like, I don't think this actually exists, but it's basically herding cattle,
Yeah.
and he gives this grandiose vision of, there's the sunrise is coming up, and there's a storm on the left, and there's 1,000 cattle, and everybody's just moving in the same general direction, moving the herd. He coined that when he was in the 173rd, and they made a great painting about that. But moving in the same direction, and you've got challenges that happen to the left, and there's a cow that runs off, and you see someone over, wrangling them together and bringing them back in. But everybody moving in the same direction. I think once you've got that moving in the same direction, then you can fine tune the challenges that are happening. A lot of times it comes down to communication. And as I navigated changing the environment that I operate in, it was just figuring out who are the people I need to talk to that are able to make change. So who are your change makers? What tools do they have that they can help you within your own organization? Understand what the environment is from a perspective of what are the challenges outside of the organization that may influence what happens within it, and then figure out who the brokers are, and utilize all the resources that are there to accomplish your mission. So.
In the civilian sector or the private sector, however we coined the term, the influencers. I think that's what's interesting to me is if you go to a community and you go talk to the mayor, chances are you're not talking to the actual person who makes things happen in the community, or the city council, or the board of whatever. It's usually influencers that are informal and well known by the community, or well known by the clan, or the group that you're dealing with, or the company. Do you see things like that? Is that the kinds of individuals you're looking for when you start to peel back the onion to understand the culture?
Absolutely. So it's not just understanding the culture, but it's a broader scope. So let's say in Kansas City, if I'm a business owner, I need to know who the best marketing people are and how they're connected. And I need to figure out how can I utilize other resources that might be readily available and free. So how can I innovate to support my business? One of the things that I really prided myself on that when I was at Mizzou was I knew that I had a recruiting role. I had to grow my program, and I knew that I was in the environment where we had one of the best journalism schools in the world, and the students that are actually in the J school there are actually they're writing the local newspaper. So I had to figure out, how do I market myself? And I don't have a budget to do this. How do I market my program? So I made sure that I was in constant contact with the media and made sure that they were coming in. And if they needed an article or a student needed a paper to write, we were them. They sent them to me. And then it was free advertising. So it's, how do you innovate so that utilizing the resources in the community, so it doesn't cost you anything. So it's participating in networking events, and guest speaking. So get in front of people. And I always used to say it was passive recruiting. So I couldn't come in and say, hey, you should join my team. But I could say, hey, I'm Gary Kerr. I work for the University of Missouri, or I work for Park University, or I'm, a United States Army officer. That's recruiting. That's selling yourself. And that the residual effect of that, the duplicity of effect, is that it's going to help your organization. So just being involved in the community, knowing who can help you, and understanding that, everybody's operating a resource constrained environment. So how can you get those things for free and do those things passively?
Yeah. And in your upbringing in the military, and for those who didn't clearly understand or put the pieces together of your career progression, but you would do operations, then we would bring you back in some capacity, either continue to educate you or put you in front of evaluating others who were going so you could pass the lessons learned, the good ideas, the best practices. And you constantly did that and ended up, recruiting young officers and essentially impacting the Army for the next 30 years. So I hope he did well at that, but I guess we'll hear about it someday. But the ability to be able to come back in and teach other people how to do that. Now that you're in the civilian world, you've kind of done that. You did the practitioner thing. Now you're in the teaching mode again. What are some of what are the top three things that you're learning that seem to be missing in the private sector that not concern you, but surprise you, or put you back a little bit, thinking that they were there, but they're not?
So the biggest thing, and I've done a bunch of instruction on this, but we're not trained air managers to be leaders. We're
Okay.
promoting salespeople that are amazing salespeople, and then we're giving them a team of 10 other salespeople. And what they know is how to be a salesperson, and we don't break them away and say, hey, we're going to train you to be leader. We're going to train you on what you need to be doing to manage those 10 people, or to manage the operations of those 10 people. Because you don't manage people, you lead people. And I think that's one thing that people don't understand, is they keep trying to manage people, but you can't. You have to motivate them. And they're in leadership, there's so many different facets to it, but you've got to build trust. That's what it starts with. So your basis of everything you do has to be based upon trust when you're in a leadership role. Managers don't do that well. They just see the bottom line. They say, hey, I need this done. They're not investing in their people to make them better leaders. And when we do find organizations that are investing in their people and giving them some training and teaching them to be leaders and bringing folks in to talk with them and encouraging them to have executive coaches, then they become better leaders. But the residual effect of that is that revenue increases, because people find an organization they want to stay at, because they know that they're cared for. And I think that's been the hardest thing, is that I feel like in corporate America, in many organizations, people are disposable. And
Yeah.
that's what they believe. And when people are disposable, how do you motivate someone that they're afraid they're going to lose their job? It's impossible to do. Um, and how productive are they if they're not, if they're under-resourced and now they feel like they're not accomplishing their job very well. And then, there's a constant threat that they might be let go. That's a challenge. And I think an organization that's in that mode is destined to fall apart until something
Yeah.
changes.
Well, that's I mean, Simon Sinek, the great author of Always Start with Why and Why Leaders Eat Last, talks about, I think it's cortisol or whatever the fight or flight chemical in the
Absolutely.
human body is. And when I first heard him say that, I don't know, 15 years or so ago, he talks about that drip, drip, drip of that chemical in your stomach. And, when I talk to groups and teams, that are in that environment where maybe, and I'm usually there because the leader has suddenly realized it's more cost effective, it's a better environment to invest in your people and take the time to train them. Even though many of them will resist because it's change, and change always causes people to push back by the human nature. And it's scary too because it means you're going to be exposed in front of other people. But when you get them in there, and what you find is the number one concern is, I'm about to get fired.
Mhm.
I live on the edge because they've never developed, they've never grown from inside, they've never consumed their own talent. They just throw them away and buy a new one, essentially, in that term. And so they're very protective, but there's zero trust. There's zero trust when you're sitting around all day long waiting to get fired. Actually was with a group 2 weeks ago, and they kept saying it over and over again. Well, if you do that, you'll get a target on your back. If you do that, you'll get fired. If you do that, they will come after you.
Mhm.
It's an organization of about 700 people, fairly small organization in our world. And I said, well, how many people got fired last year? They're like, I don't know.
Nobody.
Can anybody name one person that they know has been fired in this organization ever? And they're like, well, the last CEO. I go, yeah, okay, got it. But who's been fired in the organization? Nobody could name a single person. But the belief, I mean, that's the thing for me from a wellness perspective when I go in to help companies, and I can see why I'm there.
Mhm.
But from the moment you walk in, you can feel that fight or flight chemical drip. And imagine sitting there. And you and I have both been in toxic environments. I mean, the Army is not, 100% greatly motivated, wonderful people you love to work for every single time. You're lucky if you get one. For me, in 35 years, it was about every 5 years I got one.
That seems
And
like
the
the
rest of
same.
the time, I figured out how to survive and build skills. But that drip that he talks about is so incredible. What's your experience with any of that?
Um, so I've worked for bad leaders. I've worked for toxic leaders, and in the Army, you don't have a choice. You just suck it up. You figure it out. You maneuver through
You
it.
just what's that term?
You suck it up. Um, and then in the
You deal with
civilian world, I think um, what I've tried to do is just manage your foxhole, deflect. As the leader, if you've
All
got
right, hang on, Gary. What does that mean? Defending your possible.
So if you manage what you can control,
There you
so
go.
it's your people, the folks that are working for you, it's how can I make sure that I'm the buffer between the thing at the top that's challenging, and how can I create my own atmosphere, that there is trust between myself and them, and that I am showing them that I care about them. And I think this is one thing that the civilian industry, and not all companies, I mean, there's amazing companies out there, but some companies really struggle with, like, the individuals don't feel like anybody cares about them.
Right.
And it's because they don't take the time as leaders, as a manager. So I manage systems, right? I manage a computer. I don't have to have a relationship with that computer, but if I'm leading people, I have to have a relationship with them. So that means I got to take the time to know that their kid's sick. I've got to take the time to know that their performance is being degraded because something's happening in their life. Um, it's funny, when I was a young captain, my one of my NCOs looked at me, and we had this young soldier who was just struggling. He wasn't showing up on time. He was just all sorts of stuff. And he looked at me and said that that young soldier didn't wake up trying to make you mad. He used some other language, but he said he's
Yeah,
not trying to make you mad. So you need to understand what's going on in his life
right.
that's making him not perform at his best. And then your job is to figure out how you can help him or her effectively become better at their job. And a
Yeah.
lot of that is life. You know, it's life gets in the way of business sometimes and work. So can you, or do you have the flexibility to support people's life challenges and invest in them? You know, and
Well,
an organization
Gary,
doesn't.
what people would argue with you in the civilian world about what you just said, and I
Yeah.
wholeheartedly agree with you, is we don't operate like that. You know, we're not interested in their personal lives, and what they do at work is completely separated from that, and it's none of my business. You know, and you and I know in the Army, we're responsible for the health, welfare of the soldier and their families.
Mhm.
Every aspect of their lives are we have the ability to influence in a positive or negative way. In the civilian sector, there's a line that's drawn.
Mhm.
But what you're advocating for is a culture where you cross the line. And I think that line you're talking about is the difference between being a manager and being a leader. And so what I try to explain to them is, look, you can do it either way. You can do it that way, or you can do it this way, or you can kind of do it somewhere in the middle, but that's still confusing for the employee. So what you have to do is you have to make a commitment. Are you going to invest in your people? And if so, you got to go all in. And our experience, and I will speak for you on this one because I know you well enough. Our experience is that's the better model. That's the model where you have self-motivated people who feel that the leader's going to underwrite the risk. The leader's going to do everything they can to make sure that they're successful. And as a result of that, the business is going to go well. So, you know, again, back to Simon Sinek, even Goldman and others that are out there who are all the, you know, they're not the practitioners like you and I, they are the people who study this stuff, will say, invest in your people and the business will take care of itself. And so that's why I make sure I always tell the audiences, I'm here to help you make a choice. Now, if you want to have the drip, 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 you know, don't trust anybody. I'm about to get fired any second. Do it because I told you so. And the bottom line is the only thing that's important to you. Good luck. Go for it. But I don't want to invest any time in you either. So that's kind of the we're in.
There's a great book out there called Tribal Leadership. I think all leaders should read it. You know, it's got 5 levels of where the tribe is. And the lowest level is basically everybody in the organization, they agree their life sucks.
Yeah.
And the second level is that my life sucks. Everybody else is doing okay. The third level is, you know, I'm great, but you're not. You know, and then it progresses to we're all great. And then it progresses to really life is great as a whole, and we are making a bigger impact. And that's where leadership really comes into play. You know, if everybody's that goes to your cortisol drip, you know, and if the organization is full of cortisol, then nobody's happy. And if nobody's happy, then how can you succeed? You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it's so
Well,
counter.
that's the, you know, you get people want to get into talking about transactional leadership or transformational leadership or servant leadership. You know, they go through all that stuff. And what I tell them is, you know, there is no one way.
Yeah.
You know, good leaders, you know, Goldman will tell you they're, you know, good leaders will use one or two styles. You know, above average, better than that, we'll use 3 or 4 styles. But exceptional leaders use every leadership style that's out there to include the ones that you and I are talking about could be perceived as toxic, be a little more autocratic. You know, there's times when you got to use the knife hand. And
Absolutely.
but you know, if you have the right culture and all of a sudden you're using the knife hand, people are not going to even begin to think about asking why. They're just going to move.
Mhm.
Okay, because the trust is there to know that, man, when the knife hand comes out And this guy is saying, we got to move now or we're all going to get, whatever might happen, we go because we trust them. What I found in other organizations, the knife hand is always out. And so we all just kind of, yeah, just like last time. And we don't take the appropriate action because we've cried wolf as a leader way too many times in the environment where everything is number one priority. And I
Yes.
think that's a transition, something I'd like to hear some more about from you is, simple prioritization in the civilian sector seem to be a challenge. Are you seeing that in the things that you're doing?
It is, and I think a lot of it comes from a lack of a strategic plan, a deliberate strategic plan. So if an organization can come in and say, "Hey, this is who we want to be, this is how we get there," and I actually use, and we kind of talked about this earlier, but I use what in the military we call a commander's intent statement, but we can just call it an intent statement or a vision statement. But it's a formalized process that says this is my overarching intent, goal, vision, whatever you want to call it. This is what we want to do. This is why we want to do it. These are the timelines we want to use to achieve it. And then under that goal, there's those key things we absolutely must do. And I call it, they're just tasks. So the key thing, the tasks that we have to do in order to accomplish that broad scope goal. And that's your priority list. So there's 3 to 5 of those, no more than that. And then at the end, you have what your end state is. So what we look like when we're done. We've
Yeah.
reshaped ourselves in the environment. This is how we look against our competitors. We've got a competitive edge. Internally, this is how we are now designed or shaped. And then externally, this is how people are seeing us. So if you can be, if we're deliberate in our planning, then we can set our priorities and everybody can get on board. But I find most organizations aren't deliberate in that. They're not writing down what their main goal is. Their vision statement isn't being broadly understood. And there's methods to do that. I mean, there's lots of books that'll tell you you've got to tell stories about your vision. You've got to tell stories about your organization. So it's about building that culture, but prioritization, get those key tasks in there, and then everybody can understand what direction you're moving in. And that goes back to what we were talking about before. It's moving the herd, and
Yeah.
the best visualization is that painting.
What if their response to you is, well, our only purpose, our only goal, our only vision is to make money and leave it at that?
Well, there's making money is important, but how are they doing that that's about creating the culture. So if you've got a good culture, you can make more money.
Yeah.
If your people are motivated, and so that goes to trust, and then that goes to motivation. So how are you motivating your people to produce a higher yield for you? I'm actually reading a great book right now called Everybody Wins. So I've got a client right now who's in real estate, and Everybody Wins is about Remax and how they basically took over the world of real estate. But what they did was they basically went in and talked about this. They said, look, we've got to focus on our people and give them the real bottom line is they paid them 100% of their commissions and
Yeah.
then charged them to be branded by Remax. So the incentive is now you're making more money, but the company is not making as much, but they've changed how they've thought about it, and the reward is that 100% commission. So everybody wants to be part of that team because they're going to make more money. So it's how do you modify what you're doing to encourage motivation, intrinsic motivation, as well as extrinsic motivation for folks, and your bottom line is going to increase.
Yeah. Well, and that's, if you used your herd example, I'm trying to think how to, it's amazing to me because I'll say, what's your purpose? And they'll say, make money. I go, what's your intent? To make money. What's your vision? To make more money. And you go, okay, that's great. But if that was your moniker out on the front of this building,
Mhm.
hi, we're here to make money. I said, how would that impact on a potential client who sees that walking in the door? So the only purpose of this company that I'm coming to seek a service of some sort, and their only purpose is to make money, what would that put in your head as the future of the potential client? It would be, well, they're going to do everything they can to screw me over and make as much money as possible. So clearly, I'm not as important as the client as what they're going to milk me for, or what they're going to try to get in the contract negotiation with me. So I'm gonna go to the next door down there where their purpose is to help connect me to the world, to help my business grow by providing me expert services and 24/7, contact people that can help me if the system goes down or whatever the business is. So, I want to go to somebody who's motivated to help me as the client. Um, and understanding that it's going to cost me to do that, but understand that their support of me is going to be worth the value of me investing in that company. And that's hard to explain to some companies, especially those that are in niches that they almost have a monopoly over. And I think that's what's interesting to some of these companies where, there's very few that you can go to that provide this kind of service. And so there's less and less of a vision of what they can do. And what I find is that these companies, yeah, they're great at self-sustaining right where they're at, but there's zero growth coming. Okay. And they rarely anticipate change.
And how long are they going to survive? Like, that's a great attitude, but you
Well, I
might
mean,
not be around for very long.
look, you and I have been around higher education. And when I said, you might want to do this, this, and this, there are people in that arena that will say, well, those are business things. We're higher ed. We've been around since the 1700s. Those businesses have all come and go. So how do you argue with, or how do you talk to somebody, that's in a business that has been, I mean, look at, the telecommunications world or fiber optics and things of that nature. These are things we have to have, the power grid. These are things we have to have. And they've been around for hundreds of years in some cases. And what's interesting to me is it's that adaptive leadership style that I find, it's more as, and as you get more clients and you get into the different industries, this to me is a fascinating industry because they have been around for 100 years and they're gonna make money because they're the only game in town. But you have to convince them, the CEO's got to get up on the balcony in adaptive leadership and look, and not just for opportunities, but for, here comes a problem. The great example of that, the guy who had Blockbuster. Now he wasn't around for 100 years, but he was great, and he got so caught up in the day to day, he never got up on the balcony and went, "Oh man, look at this thing coming at me," called Netflix. He could have done some really interesting things if he'd have seen it. So, the examples of people pushing back in the private sector are interesting because you and I have had the advantage of a controlled group of people. We've consumed our own talent because we have to grow our own. We don't hire from outside. And so what we've seen is that kind of leadership / management on steroids. And then trying to explain the value of some of that to the civilian sector, again, it's difficult to do.
I think I guess as you were talking, I was thinking through how would I really actually address that? And it's how efficient are you right now? So for example, if an organization is if the culture is bad in the organization and they have to train people up every time they leave because we're not paying them enough or they're not happy there. So what is the cost of that training? So what is the efficiency? So it takes that person, let's just say they have to make in a month, they're supposed to make 60 phone calls and enrollments. Let's just talk about enrollments. So they're supposed to be doing 60 enrollments a month. And it takes us 3 months to get them to 60.
Yeah.
And then they leave at month 6 because they're not happy, or month 8 or a year from then. So now we've got to start over. So our throughput has significantly decreased, our efficiency is decreased, and our revenue is not going to be, we're going to still make money, but it's not going to be what it could once they get moving and they're efficient in their job. So that comes down to, creating culture that people want to be part of instead of recycling people. So there is an inefficiency that they're losing money.
Yeah. Well, I think, the argument is in the aggregate, it's not that bad. And if we had to give people raises and if we had to spend more money on HR to develop people, if we had to pull people away from their desk to go to training, it's the adage of, I'm too busy. I mean, how many times have you heard that? This is all great. I really should be doing that. You're absolutely right. I agree with you 100%, but we're just too busy. I mean, how do you handle something like that?
Well, it comes down to that bottom line is how are you as an organization? Are you losing efficiency? Are you losing funding because of your inefficiency? So it's, I think that's probably where I would go with that
Yeah.
is, what are the side effects? In the end, yeah, you're still making it, but you could be making it better. So if your goal is we want increased revenue, we want a lot of money, then you've got to invest. You absolutely must invest. And maybe that is you invest in individuals so you don't have to take everybody offline, and you can integrate the training into those folks, or you pick the leaders that are going to make a difference and that can spread the word internally. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that is a challenge. I haven't run into that yet. You've got a few more years doing this than I do. And one of the things that I try to always do is figure out as a consultant or as a leader, figure out what the questions are you have to ask to get people to get to the answer you want.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what we're doing right now.
Well, and I think this is one let's pull the thread on this one, because this is the most common issue that I see is, you might, if you're lucky, you get uh the CEO to see it. The CEO has enough wherewithal to say, okay, we're gonna slow down just enough to do this. And then you give them a very deliberate places to focus that effort. If you can determine where that return on investment would be. Because the argument is, if you do these three things better, you improve the overall bottom line by X percentage. Okay. You can't make them like the world you and I grew up in, but you can figure out where those tweaks are. And your cross-cultural competence training as a consultant is hugely valuable to a CEO, because you can go into a culture and assess it fairly quickly. I mean, that's the thing I think that surprises people. So I use, there's the overt assessment, there's the covert assessment, there's double blind, there's a lot of different ways to do it. But what I prefer is, talk to the leadership, say, let me wander around
Mhm.
and give you a feel of where you can do some tweaking. And I'm never looking for a person, to get rid of. I'm never looking for something, but I'm looking for, I like to call them historical scabs, and you and I know what those are. Those are something that's just accumulated over time, and you can always find them by going, why are you doing that? And they say, well, it's because we've always done it that way. And so there's a scab sitting there that, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, there was a scar there was a bleeding wound, and somebody put a policy on it to stop the bleeding, or put a requirement on it to stop the bleeding. And then what's happened is we've just kept putting more band-aids on it. So you got this big stack of band-aids on something that healed 5 years ago, but we still do it because we don't remember why we did it. And we don't take the time to figure out, should we stop doing it? And that's the big three questions that we advocate for here is, what do you need to stop doing? And really, in a lot of cases, if you find one, two things to stop doing, the bottom line goes up and nobody loses a job. Nobody gets in trouble. It's just, why are we doing this report on Thursdays? Okay. I don't know if you remember at Cadet Command, I think my favorite example of this was, every Thursday, right when I first got there, I noticed my staff was stressed. You can just feel it walking in the building Thursday mornings. It's like, why does the atmosphere feel tension? You walk around. So you start walking around later going, what's going on? And you're like, oh, we've got the trade-off report. We got to get this report done. And we've got all day Thursday because it's due from some rocket scientist said 8 o'clock on Friday morning, which means people kill themselves on Thursday and through the evening to get it done and approved Thursday night to be turned in first thing, Friday morning. And when I looked at the report and sat down with people and talked about the report, it was obvious that we'd already reported this information. We reported the information through the individual channels from each staff to the higher headquarters. But somebody years and years ago
Keep doing
said,
it.
we don't have time as the higher headquarters to put it all together in one report. Let's make them do it. And so we're out there doing their work, which irritated me. But but I asked, what are you doing with the report? Well, they're just redistributing it back to the people who already know. There was nothing the report did. And so I called my boss and I said, hey, how important is the Thursday report to you? And he's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I said, okay. So I brought the staff in and said, we're not going to do it ever again. And if anybody calls, patch them into me. And we'll see if they outrank me and the 4-star who told me he doesn't know what the report is. And guess what they did, Gary? They did it again. They wrote the report again because they were terrified of the higher headquarters of getting in trouble. And I had to ring and go, hey, what part of don't do it didn't you guys get? I said, I got this. I swear to God, if somebody's yelling at you, I want to talk to them. And guess what? There was a very low ranking person at the higher headquarters who that was their sole purpose in life was to get that report because we've always done it that way. And I said, I don't do it anymore. And that to the staff, they were like, well, that's cool. I said, now what other stupid things are we doing that we no longer need to do? And it was amazing how much stuff you could scrape off the deck. And then you could actually see the deck, which is the second question is what are we supposed to be doing that we're not doing very well because we've been doing all this superfluous stuff. And you look at the deck and you go, okay, we need to clean it. We need to do this. We need to make it more efficient. We need to repair some stuff over here. And then, and only then, do you let the good idea fairies come in your office. Okay. Because only when you get rid of the superfluous, make sure the stuff you're supposed to be done is done very, very well to the highest possible quality. Then and only then do you consider innovation. And that's the problem is so many people come in and go, I'm going to be the guy known for all this innovative stuff. And all the employee hears is, oh, great, some more stuff put in my inbox, And I see that when I get into these companies that say they're too busy, it's because they have historical scabs throughout the organization. And it only takes half a day to find them at that.
Frenetic activity, right? I think that's the
Yeah.
term we've
But see, I
used.
think hiring somebody like you just to wander around, come back and advise me. I mean, if CEOs were smart, COOs, even CFOs, because CFOs, when I'm learning, they pretty much think they run, everything, and everybody else is just there to do what they want them to do, which is an interesting dynamic, from our world. And it is true to a degree. If your sole purpose is to make money, then the CFO is a very powerful person. But if one of those, C-suite guys would say, or gals would say, hey, Gary, come in here, just wander around for a day and tell me what you think. I think they would be shocked at what you could tell them in a very short period of time.
So I think there's a handful of things, and I actually use those 3 questions. Somebody taught me those, I don't know,
So
7 years ago. So it's pretty good. But I think that one of the problems that we have is that senior leaders in our organizations, presidents, CEOs, they don't necessarily think it's their job to go wander around and talk to their own people.
right.
And when you don't do that, you don't know what's going on in your organization because nobody's talking to you. And it's this fear factor that, if you want to talk to me, you come up to the castle. And that's not how they can understand what's going on in their organization. And yeah, that takes a little bit of time, but if you put it into your calendar, that it's leadership by walking around.
Yep.
And then that president or that CEO walks around, they talk to people, they're building trust, they're building the organization, they're building a culture where people are like, wow, I just talked to the president, and but they need to be frequent enough that when they do see people and they ask questions like, wait, what's your biggest challenge down here right now? And then they can create that relationship where they understand and can see inside their organization. They have to, it's their job, see inside your organization and figure out how you can create more efficient processes. That's how you learn that's how you learned that report
Yeah.
was a waste of time, and it took 20 12 hours of everybody's week.
Yeah.
And it's just
I think
that's
it was somewhere over 600 man hours to put that thing together every Thursday, which was crazy. Yeah, yeah. Now, the one caution I would have for you, the wandering around is incredible, and it's very good to see yourself. See, and when we say that, see yourself, that means see the organization, get a real feel for it. But you can't go back up and then cause something that causes this
yes.
boulder to come rolling down and crush 8 people on the way down. You have to really get good at managing the second, third order effects of something that you've observed. I think, the best way to actually do it is hopefully nobody notices that it's you
Mhm.
or that they don't know who you are and chance to do so. I sat in Second Brigade's motor pool in Third Infantry Division as a 1 star, and it was funny because I was in uniform and everything, and I sat with Specialist Perkins, and I dispatched vehicles for about 3 hours, and that single, well, actually it was a colonel. I was a promotable, so I had a colonel on my chest, and it didn't, nobody noticed. It was just, I just kept trying to dispatch vehicles, and I had a little bit of a line, and somebody was complaining because I was going too slow, and I apologized, and I had a little specialist there trying to help me, and we got through it. But what amazed me was he told me so much about that unit. The big thing for me was nobody thought, hey, sir, why are you dispatching vehicles? And it didn't dawn on some leader to go, hey, there's a colonel in the motor pool dispatching vehicles. Maybe I should let the captain know. Maybe I should let the major know. Maybe I should let the brigade commander know that there's this guy down here dispatch, and he's not even doing it really well. But I learned a lot about, because some kid will come up and go, why do you want to see my PMCS, my maintenance checks? I said, well, that's what you're supposed to have before you get a dispatch. Well, we don't do that here. Oh, okay.
Oh,
So
noted.
those are those little things you go, interesting. But you don't go crush somebody for it. You just ask the questions, how important are PMCSs? Why don't you guys do that? Well, blah 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 blah. Okay, well, let's not do that anymore. You don't go play I got you. You just try to figure out what's working and what's not. And so, yeah, I mean, to me, if you had somebody you could turn loose in your organization to wander around and just observe, who was a trained person to do it, because I mean, you didn't go coach, teach, and mentor in strategic planning at Fort Leavenworth unless you were a trained coach that can quickly see something, analyze something, make a determination, and create a recommendation to help somebody improve. And that's the skill you bring to the table.
It's those processes. Like I think they made a show about that, is like Undercover Boss or something like
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah.
a good one.
And I did that when I was in cadet command. I did that survey. I asked those questions of my cadets, and I came in I got the survey results on a Thursday. I talked to a few cadets and I talked to my staff on a Friday, and by Monday I made some changes, and they were like,
Yeah,
"What? We spoke and you did something?" Because yes, yes,
yeah.
why not?
Yeah, you see states try to do that with a sign that says you asked for this improvement and we're doing it. And to me, I always like that's a smart thing to do. But yeah, that we had when we were cadet command, I don't know if you know it, but the Assistant Secretary of the Army, a political appointee, former congressional professional military staff director, Deb Wada, the Honorable Deb Wada, called me and said, I will be Cadet Ward going through basic camp at Fort Knox this summer. Don't tell anybody, and Deb, I don't know, she was maybe in her late 30s, early
Oh, wow.
40s, somewhere in there when she came down. And this is a woman who wielded tremendous power in the Army. I mean, she was incredible, and she works with us today at the Way Forward. But and she so impressed me because she goes down in there and she puts on a uniform. She's cadet nobody, and she's going to basic training. And I was horrified we were going to hurt her because she was older. And she was just like, I'm willing to take the risk because I didn't serve. I'm a political appointee. How can I possibly be in charge of manpower and reserve affairs in the Army if I don't know? And I didn't realize she had done it at Fort Jackson at basic training with
Wow.
the enlisted kids as well. And she ran around out there with our cadets with nobody knowing who she was. And finally, I think we extracted her day 5 or 6 when she was on the land nav course. It was raining like
Awesome.
cats and dogs. And she didn't ask, but I couldn't take it anymore. I went out and swept her away because I didn't want her to get hurt. But the fact that she did it and the fact that she didn't make a big deal about her, nothing,
Mhm.
went back up there and she let those experiences impact when she was making billion-dollar decisions about manning in the Army. And that's, to me, I get goosebumps just telling the story because to me, that's somebody I will walk across glass to go follow, because the fact that she would come down to us, even for me, as a 2-star general at the time, she was coming down to me to do that with my people. And I admire the hell out of that. So I think there's a lot of value in that for CEOs to consider.
And there's lure and legacy that follows that builds. So as they have a vision for the organization, and that is part of their vision, that is part of their culture. Like, people will talk about that kind of stuff, and they don't have to tell anybody that they did it. Everybody will know, and then
Oh,
then there'll be an element of respect for them forever, just like you're saying, do anything for them. That is trust. That is building that trust and making sure that everybody understands it.
Yep.
And that
Yep.
that shows humility, and what I think there's no greater trait in an individual. Well, there's probably a couple greater, but humility, I think, is in the top three.
Yeah.
If you don't have humility as a leader, wow, you're going to struggle. Now, as a manager, sure, you don't have any humility, because as a manager, I just see people as robots. But
Yeah.
as a leader, I see them as people, and I
Yeah.
see my role in their life as helping them so that we can make more money. And it's just it's a great way to kind of look at things and do things, and learn about your organization.
Yep. Yep. I
So,
agree. Hey, well, we're coming up on an hour here. Let me ask you one last thing here
okay.
and get your feedback and then we'll wrap it up. What if somebody was going to say what Gary Kerr known for? What is a Gary Kerr ism or motto or saying or favorite book? What do we remember Gary about?
Um, wow, that's actually a hard one. So as I look through what is my brand,
Yeah.
and my brand is that I was a combat leader with almost 4 years overseas, and that I think people will tell you that I I build trust in people, and I make sure that they are developing themselves to just be better leaders. And that's my goal in life. As I retired, we all go through that transformation process, and I've identified two things that I'm passionate about. The first is making people better leaders so that their organizations can be more successful and so that they can grow as individuals. And then the second is advocating for veterans. The transition is hard, and I often say this. In fact, I'm thinking about doing a TED talk on it. But our transition, we bring an 18-year-old into the military or a 20-year-old into the officer corps or however old they are, and we give them 8 to 16 weeks of training to reprogram them. And then on the backside, we give them maybe 5 days, and we're not setting them up for success. And I think that's a leadership problem as a whole. So those are the two areas I want to focus on: is how can I help impact society better, advocate for veterans so that we are advocating within corporate America the skills that veterans bring to the table, and how they can best be used in an industry, and so that we are seen as just an asset. And that's really key. So veterans as an asset, and then how do I help organizations just get better?
Yeah. And I'll end with this, Gary. Hire us because we have skills. Don't
Absolutely.
hire us because you feel sorry for us. Don't feel sorry for us. We enjoyed what we did. We did what we did for all of our own personal reasons. But Gary says he's got 6 years of combat experience as a leader. That is like dog years in the civilian sector. He's got more leadership experience in those 6 years than most have in a lifetime. And he has them under the most arduous of conditions under combat. So, Gary, I wish you the best of luck. Let's keep in touch and do this again, okay?
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.